thanks. I hope you've enjoyed a nice lunch and had a chance to continue the conversations that were ongoing before the break. I would like to welcome our panelists. So let me quickly introduce everyone, not to waste our precious time. So we'll go from left to right. So András Sík, sociologist working at the Center of Social Sciences, Institute of Sociology at ELTE University in Budapest. Barbara Rögdi, the organizer of this conference, I'm sure you all know her. She's the CEO of Helpers, which is a company working in commercial immigration, mostly.
Yes.
Yeah. And the publisher and maybe one of the translators of Professor Kaplan's book,
That's true.
Open Borders. We've got Sándor Éssik here, a lawyer, moderator of the previous panel, and also editor-in-chief of an important Facebook page or blog, currently reaching over 35,000 people. The name makes sense and is funny in Hungarian. In English, I don't think it makes any sense. It's Hungarian News at Parliament, is it?
Yeah, that's the rough
All right.
translation.
Anyway, we have an opinion leader here. That's the main point. And then we have Victoria.
It's an overstatement.
Okay, he's being modest. We have Victoria Horváth here, representing Migration Aid, one of the most important NGOs in this country, dealing with waves of whom? Refugees, migrants, asylum seekers, the people arriving right now in large numbers from Ukraine. So she's doing the work on the ground. She's communications lead and spokesperson of Migration Aid. And next to me, Mr. Sabo, Daniel Sabo, deputy editor-in-chief of NAPI, an online...
economic media outlet.
Okay, so economic media. All right. So thanks very much for accepting Barbara's invitation. And there's myself. My name is Miklós Bán. I have nothing to do with all this. I'm CEO of a translation company, and I ended up moderating this panel because I've moderated panels before.
Yes.
And this is my dog Koper, who's a refugee himself. So don't try to pet him. He's a bit of a forest creature.
Like
all right.
refugees usually are.
So our panel's topic is shaping public perception. So we'll be talking about many of the issues that were touched upon in previous panels. It could be a difficult topic, and some of it was carefully avoided by many of us here in this conference, because the topic is rather political. We'll try to make sense of it I can't say in a non-political way. I don't think that's doable, but a non-offensive way. Let's put it this way. So my first introductory warm-up question would be, what are some of the misconceptions that you encounter during your work in connection with immigration and the refugees? Bobby, do you want to start?
Of course, sure. So I thought about this question because we prepared this introductory question before. And I think the most striking change came in 2015 when the previous migrant wave hit Hungary. So I have been running an immigration consultancy for 17 years. And until 2015, most people who heard what we do basically didn't really understand what it is, or they thought that we basically work with helping foreigners in Hungary do various things. We have always called ourselves a business and immigration provider, but until then that word meant nothing pretty much. And in the past 5, 6, 7 years, since public discourse about migration and immigration has become a lot more common, I have encountered a variety of attitudes to this simple word. So to us, immigration is basically a legal process. It doesn't carry any sort of positive or negative connotation. That it's not a sentimental thing. It's basically a thing that people do when they arrive in a country and they want to acquire status. And in the past few years, I have encountered everything from people saying that this is a scary thing that we do, and aren't we afraid? I have had people whisper back to me saying, I don't think we're supposed to say immigration anymore, as if I was using a derogatory term. And in fact, in a lot of cases, we have had to qualify what it is that we do in light of the propaganda and in light of the public discourse. So many companies that do the same thing that we do call themselves relocation companies. They call their clients expats instead of immigrants. Many of these people actually refer to themselves as such, and immigration itself has basically become a derogatory term. So for example, when Professor Kaplan's book came out, the word immigration is in the title. And we noticed with huge surprise that this word is starting to scare people away. So we went to the book festival, the Könyvhét, which is the biggest book expo in Hungary for new publications. And we had high school students handing out flyers about the book. And they came back saying, people went up to them and said, you're not supposed to promote immigration. Or on the other hand, telling them that they should be careful because immigration is really not a word that we should be using anymore to describe people.
Okay, thank you. Well, you've actually touched upon quite a few topics that we're going to discuss now, and I think we'll try to also piggyback on the fact that you happen to be a linguist as well, and we'll be talking about
correct, yes.
language quite a lot in this panel, I think. But getting back to our quick warm up, Vicky, can I ask you? I mean, you're on the ground. You're at the train station when the trains roll in. You're at the borders where people cross. What are some of the misconceptions that you encounter?
Well, I could say one main thing, and this is the way people think about can I say refugees, or I don't know how to call them.
We'll know what you mean.
Okay, so people fleeing from Ukraine. So I had some conversations with civilians, with Hungarians, and they expect that the fleeing people will be like from a different culture with different languages. They expect them to be poor and without any material belongings with them. And what they see at the borders, at the train stations, the people are like look like us. So they are like us with suitcases, with backpacks. And it's like a different reality that they think because they heard it in the government's communication during the previous years that refugees, the people that are terrorists and they are scary people, they want to hurt us. So it's just like a very different perspective that they expected, and that it surprised them.
Okay, no, that's clear. Sándor, can I ask you? You meet the public virtually, but you meet them in a very direct way, if you will, through the comments that you get. What are some of the most common misconceptions that you encounter?
Well, my audience is composed mostly of the highly educated urban Hungarian population, and it is sometimes shocking to see that even this top level of well-educated Hungarian people have very strong sets of misconceptions about migration in general and certain types of migrants. There are very deeply embedded sets of beliefs about certain countries, certain parts of the world,
Sorry, go on.
So certain parts of the world, and okay, I think that's more interesting.
Maybe somebody could take that dog.
Sorry about this. Stealing the show.
I'm never gonna be that cute, so.
But we listen.
Please continue.
Okay, so one always thinks that anti-migration propaganda hits the lower educated tiers of the society, which is true. The first blow goes there, but on the long run, and this has been going on for 7, 8 years now. On the long run, it slowly finds its way to the brains of higher educated people, and now we are at the point that even people who have a friendly attitude towards immigrants or refugees, whatever other categories of migrants, even they have some misbeliefs so deeply embedded that it's going to be a very, very long procedure or long time to get those out of people's brain. I mean, that's I think the most shocking experience about how Hungarians or how Hungarian people deal with immigration or think about immigration.
So this is going to be the $150,000 question at the end of this panel about what to do, how to deconstruct. I have things falling on and off. How to deconstruct these very strong narratives, and I think this is perhaps a pointer I should ask Mr. Schick, Andrea, because he knows a thing or two about how this situation came about. I mean, Barbara mentioned a very important date, 2015. I believe, having read some of the your writing, you also believe that 2015 was a key turning point. But before we get there, that's my next question. I want to ask you, you're an academic, what is it that you encounter in your daily work or in your daily life that are misconceptions about immigration?
None. I don't have a daily life, and I intend to keep it as it is. I sit, write, and then sometimes I meet with the public. That's it.
All right, so those are the advantages of the ivory tower.
Exactly.
I will get back to you with my next question. You're next. I'm
Try
not gonna let you get away with it so easily. But first, Daniel, you basically represent, let's say, well, I was going to say mainstream media or press, but that's a very thin layer at this point in Hungary, and we'll get back to that as well. What are some of the misconceptions that you meet?
I cannot say there are one big misconception about immigration or migration, but my favorite, or not favorite, but most commonly mentioned misconception is that migration is a whole new thing and you can handle it with simple solutions. So it's a very complex and difficult phenomenon, and you cannot find a way to just say that all the people who arrive to Hungary are immigrants. We have guest workers, we have refugees, asylum seekers, someone who are fleeing from a war. And as a journalist, it's very difficult to cover this problem, because you can't use any of these words without preconception from the audience's side. Sorry. I'm just recovered from COVID-19, so I have a brain fog, and it's really hard for me to find the proper words. So the audience has a preconception when you use words as refugees, as migrants, and guest workers, and so on. So there are no simple way to talk about it. There are no simple way to handle it. And for me, that's the greatest and most difficult misconception.
All right. No, that's clear. We'll definitely get back to that. I promised I would get back to you, Andrea. My first real question would go something like this. It's rather peculiar that apparently in Central Eastern European countries they seem to be more anti-immigrant than actual target countries where these migrants actually want to go and where they want to stay. I happen to know that you have an explanation and you've written extensively about how well, the hearts and minds changed, and what those in power had been doing to create these attitudes. So may I ask you about the role of propaganda in all this?
Okay, just first to answer your question, the good news is that indeed East Europeans tend to be above the average, if there is a European average, anti-immigrant or xenophobic, but they are also anti-Semite, anti-Gypsy, anti-anything, intolerant.
That's your good news.
As that's the good news. So we are. It's not against immigrants. We are, in general, I would say, half-tamed barbarians from the eastern pasture, and the civilization, to the extent we are ready and able to use, is only on the surface. So therefore, I don't think it's surprising. What is surprising is that there are a lot of among them who actually can get rid of this type of general attitude and use actively their civilizatory basis to do something. But that's the exception, not the rule. To come back, and this is, I would say, let's say the basic level. And then on top of it, there are certain political systems, regimes, who use various elements of the beast in us and feed it with fear and other first-class food for the beast, to increase this type of intolerance in the public, not in the intelligentsia. We are more or less well defended against it, if we want, unless we want to make money from it. But that's a different issue. But unless this is the case, we are more or less irresistible to it. And then the Hungarian government, in my view, and indeed I wrote an article in 2016, so from the very beginning, uses a professional, very sophisticated, very well-funded, long-term, and I would say exportable Hungaricum, Hungarian specialty, how to do it. So we are in a leading position in the region and all over in the world, how to feed the beast.
May I ask you, I mean, I understand this concept of we are savages here in the fringes of the East, and we're more easily incited to hatred, and I'm sure that has historical and sociological reasons. But what I'm more interested in is, you said it's a Hungaricum, it's a Hungarian specialty. In what respect is it special, what is happening here in Hungary in terms of propaganda? And
no, there's nothing innovative as far as the details of the propaganda techniques. This moral panic button system, which I call it, this Hungarian system like this, uses. It's all known elements from since the First World War, more or less. And then different regimes developed it a little bit further, from Goebbels to let's say the Russian experts. But that's just the basic. What is I think the really creative and the really rare, or if not unique, solution in our case is that it has already lasted for how many years? For already, I don't know, 8 years, not 8 years, 6 years, and it is centrally organized, and it covers all type of media, but not only the media. It has special technologies to reach even those who are not under the direct influence of media consumption. For example, the national consultation, which are push-polls. Again, it's well known from the Finkelstein area and before from the US, but the way it is incorporated into the system is a unique one. And there are the billboard campaigns, which is again a very sophisticated way how to use an old-timer, a traditional form of communication, but it reaches everyone because it's everywhere, you cannot escape it. And then you have several scapegoats, not just George Soros, but around Soros a whole network, and then you incorporate into this discourse various outsiders from the EU and depending on what, in case of pandemic, Bill Gates and other conspiracy elements, and within the society, the leftists, the opposition, the NGOs, and you mix it together and add different topics, not a single topic, different topics with different constellations. So every part of the society is sensitive to each part of this mix. They just have to be let to find it. So this is really a sophisticated and a wonderfully fine-tuned and tailored technology. So it is really dangerous.
Sándor, you mentioned that most of your readership consists of educated people, etc. But you have mentioned when we talked before this panel that what you see is that these ideas, these toxic ideas, sort of through this strange osmosis, seep through the holes and reach way up. It's not only uneducated people who are actually inundated with these ideas. So I'm wondering if the process that Andre is mentioning, do you think this is it? Is the national consultations the thing that really gets to your educated readers and changes their minds in subtle ways, or is it?
No, it's part of that. But another tool in this system, what was just explained to us, is that there is a whole framework of terminology built up on immigration. We did not notice in the last 6-7 years, but it happened to us that in Hungarian we tend to use certain words for certain phenomena. And these words have so many connotations that in the end of the day they shape our thinking about these things. And even if there is a well-educated population, a well-educated audience of any media, if we are forced in that terminological framework, it shapes our thinking. And even if we are friendly to the immigrants or like pro-immigration or whatever the description is for our positive thinking towards immigration, if we stay in that framework, we still use those words. Let me draw a parallel here with feminism. Like there's a big part of feminist thinking is, or anti-racist thinking, to pick another example, to get rid of certain expressions like the N-word or other words like that. We are basically trapped in that framework, and by today, even those people who don't want to send these people back to be shot by the Russians or by the Taliban or whatever, even they call them migrants. Even they are afraid of them being Muslim. Even they are afraid that they will, to put it to the extreme, they won't know how to use a toilet. And that's a real life example of someone who was completely friendly with immigration, completely okay with people coming to Hungary, work here, live here. Will the toilets be still clean? I mean, how many clean public toilets did you
Never
see
been
in Hungary?
clean. Yeah, I was going to comment.
And slowly but surely, even the Hungarian intelligentsia was forced in that terminological framework. And as long as we stay in that, we will think in a way which is consistent with the system which Andrew just explained to us.
Thank you. We're veering towards the question of language, which is really at the heart of this problem. Barbie?
Yeah, so sorry, maybe you have a question, but I just wanted to comment on language use that I have had this debate with many people whose responsibility it is to reform this language, who should...
With me recently.
With you recently
You're
as
next.
well, yes, and with Miki on other subjects and so on. And so the general consensus is that language use, or at least this is at the basis of political correctness, that language use should be defined by the people to whom we are referring. So we should ask the women how they would like to be addressed. We should ask people of color, whether they would like to be called black or colored or person of color, what would they prefer and what makes them feel most comfortable. The problem is that immigrants, at least in Europe, they cannot speak for themselves. So I don't know what is the situation in the US, whether immigrants have a say in the language that we use to refer to refugees, immigrants, asylum seekers, and so on. But at least in Hungary, immigrants, migrants, refugees, they do not speak Hungarian. So there is no chance that they're going to speak up against any kind of discriminatory usage. And as Sándor said, in a lot of ways it's not discriminatory. We're simply playing according to the paradigm rules set by the propaganda. So in fact, migrant is not a discriminatory term, neither is immigrant, neither is refugee or any of this. But since we do not qualify these terms, the left wing, for example, the opposition media calling people migrants in the past 8 years was derogatory in the sense that they didn't say, okay, we're going to call them migrants, but we want to make it clear to everybody that we want to reclaim the word migrant for it to be a neutral term. They just simply started using the term, and since the term was already on the billboards and it was already used in propaganda, it kind of already shaped the discussion and it put it into the framework that I presume they would not actually want to be in. So I think that part of the issue here is who is actually qualified and who is in a position to do something about it.
I think I have to come back to you, Dani, with this. It is, I suppose, widely agreed that the media and the press have to have a say in this or have a responsibility in this. So how do you tackle this? First of all, the terminological issue, and then on a wider scale, the way you write about this problem. What kind of pressures do you encounter, and from where and how?
Okay, so we have responsibility how we shape the public perception of immigration, and I can agree with every one of you on that issue, because the language, how we talk about immigration, is captured by the governmental narrative. So we use the term migrant, or we just try to distinguish ourselves from that and call it call these people asylum seekers or arrivals or so on, trying to find a neutral word. There is no good answer for that, because when I take some step back. So I have written my first article about immigration, mass immigration, in 2014, when it was not an issue in the governmental context, and it was not part of the propaganda, and it wasn't about people fleeing from the Middle East or from Africa or so, from Afghanistan or so, some other distant places. People were fleeing from Kosovo because the poverty and some other issues with German, so with other issues in change in German law. And when I asked some experts about experts of immigration, which terminology should I use, they said that migrant is the perfect because it's neutral. It doesn't claim that these people are fleeing from political ideas or political oppression or poverty. It contains everything. Neutral doesn't say that those people are criminals or so on. And in 2015, when the Charlie Hebdo attacked in Paris, it all changed in a sudden. So our government started to use the word immigration and migration and migrants for these people and for this situation. And if you use that word, you play their game. So you are fortifying the way of thinking or the way of perception of these people. And if you try to distinguish yourself, calling these people asylum seekers, refugees, and so on, so trying to find a more proper word for the situations or who they are, you are still playing that game, because they say that if you use the word refugee, you are the part of the Soros network or so on. So there is no good word and no good answer for that. Back then I worked for the index.hu, which was the major, so the journal that has the most bigger viewership in Hungary. And we try to use sentences to describe this situation. So people who are fleeing from war from Syria or the Middle East, and people who are fleeing from poverty or from climate change and other catastrophes from Africa, and try to use these words to describe this situation to make it more clear or acceptable for our readers, but they all have these preconceptions when you try to use this. So you are relativizing this problem. So you are saying that we should intake everyone from those people. So it's hard.
Where do these comments come from, or where do these kinds of pressure come from?
From our readership and from our audience. So you have to use social media to reach your audience. And when you post an article with a title like 400,000 refugees arrived from Syria today, commenters and so on has this preconception that you are using wrong words, that you are on the other side of our government, you don't want to keep us safe and so on.
Okay, listen, but then, and this is also a question to you, Sándor. So what you're saying is that it's a two-way street. So it's not only you, the press, shaping public perception, but it's your readership that shapes the way you write and think about a problem. Is this the case?
Well, I'm in a special situation because my page on the Facebook is a hobby project, so I don't make money on that, and certainly not make my living on that. But even so, I sometimes feel that I have to basically clash with my audience on certain issues, because yes, there's sometimes a very strong public opinion, and if you write something that is not completely aligned with that public opinion, yes, you might encounter with some anger and some people writing interesting things to you in private messages. But yeah, it happens. But I think it happens to any media that, you know, no one is so stupid than an editor of a publication, because what we get is that you are you know, most of the messages I get is about how I am being an idiot and not knowing what I'm writing about. But yeah, that happens.
But sorry to interrupt, but I think that, you know, there are two issues here. One is you know, what kind of emotional response certain terms elicit, and the other thing is precision. So, you know, it's very difficult to talk in depth about something that we cannot name precisely. So calling somebody a migrant if they are a migrant is one thing. Calling somebody a migrant if they are not, or calling somebody an immigrant if they are a migrant, or a refugee if they are an immigrant, that just, in addition to potentially eliciting the wrong response, it's also just simply factually wrong. So I think that part of the issue here is that, for example, as Donny mentioned, migrant is the neutral term, but it has been taken over by government propaganda, but we don't have an alternative. So there's no other word. That is the word.
So your way to go would be to reclaim the term?
I don't have a way. I think that I don't see a better way. But I have been told by many people in different areas of communication that that's a hopeless enterprise at the moment. So look at what happened to claim to different types of terms in the history of PC. Sometimes some terms are beyond being reclaimed because they are simply too far gone. In that case, new terms have come up, or potentially acronyms or something more neutral, you know. And in some cases, some movements have reclaimed certain terms that we thought were gone. So I think those are the options.
Yeah, I mean, I think one way out of this, you know, terms being taken over is to openly talk about them, because nothing worse can happen that if a term or a phenomenon enters in the realm of things we don't discuss in public. I mean, every society has those terms. I mean, some societies are more open about discussing like love life of people, and others are very closed and not even mentioning that the gender of a certain person. Or in some countries, people openly discuss like ethnic origin of someone, and in other countries we tend to not talk about, you know, the descendants or the ancestors of a person. So there's always a set of things we don't discuss in public. Immigration and migrants, people coming to this country, are discussed in a way which if we try to right now, if we try to discuss this phenomenon more openly, we will encounter a lot of basically prude reactions about this. You don't discuss this. Yeah, I know a couple of migrants, but they are nice migrants, not that type of migrants. We enter this kind of conversations all the time, and one way of breaking the paradigm, this communicational paradigm in which right now we are stuck, is just to talk about it. I mean, especially if we come to organizations like Migration Aid. I mean, in the Hungarian press, it is very common to see, you know, set piece articles. I mean, what is written about migrants is what is usually written about migrants, and there are very few instances when someone actually goes there and I mean, I'm talking like touches that and actually sees one migrant, and here is a migrant. He will not hurt you. He doesn't have a gun. He knows how to use the toilet. And slowly but surely, it has to be brought back in public discourse that these are just people. We are talking about them. We are calling them names. And we are calling them names because that's their name. And
and Andrea, can I butt in here a little bit and ask you? I mean, I really appreciate the constructive nature of what you're saying, Sándor, and also the optimism. I'm wondering what the academic we have in this panel thinks about the possibility of deconstructing this large negative narrative on immigration.
Again, let me start with the good news. The contact theory, which you actually refer to, really has been tested and empirically proven that if you have personal face-to-face contacts with migrants and refugees, that decreases the level of xenophobia and your intolerance. But it has certain limitations, so don't count on it on large scale and on the long run. As to your question, I think a bit misleading if we focus only on the single term, migrant, either refugee. Forget asylum seeker, it's too technical, too difficult, it won't work. But if you just try to understand the differences between migrant and refugee, the misleading element of it, for example, in case of migrant, it never stands in the official propaganda alone. They always say illegal migrant. And if you add illegal to the migrant, ta-da, you have the negative connotation full-heartedly. And then you have no chance to use it as a neutral way anyway. The other what I wanted to say, we are working now, it's a huge Horizon 2020 all-European research on migration narratives. And we want to try to understand how narratives emerge and how narratives are shaped by using different frames and how they are actually influencing the thinking of certain groups of the society. I have certain doubts whether we can answer these questions by the end of the day. But anyway, that's our hope. No, that's not my hope, that's their hope, but I join them. But what is important that in our case, my colleagues can prove it, We started the analysis in 2015 with the analysis of the parliamentary debate and the media debates on the quota, relocation quota. And already then, it was a full-heartedly elaborated, strong anti-migration discourse, very influential, because all the media could do to use those discussions, those discourses which appeared in the parliament. And being nice journalists gave the information from the parliament to the public. But what came from the parliament, that was anti-migrant, full of anti-migrant sentiments. And the first national consultation, remember the title of the first national consultation? National consultation on immigration and terrorism. If you put immigration and terrorism, then no escape.
Sándor, let me get back to you briefly. I bought your book for my mother last year, and I browsed through it. And I remembered your starting point was that many issues, among them immigration, is such that, well, as you put it, educated people should know much more about. So that seems to be one of your missions, to just stuff more information into people's heads. Do I understand correctly that is your suggestion of a possible way out, just giving more information?
Well, it's not the only thing to do, but that's the thing I can do. So yes, but it's very important to set things right in people's heads, that to have the correct information, or better to say, to have access to the correct information, because propaganda will always be stronger, but there must be media outlets or other sources of information where neutral and factual information is available. Because if it's not, then there's no chance. I mean, and I'm not saying that because I'm nicely talking about phenomena like immigration or like some political things will change everything and will change everything fast. No, it will be a very, very long and painful procedure. But if the well-educated people, the top class, the intelligentsia in Eastern European terms, does not do its share, then nothing's going to happen. I mean, I think it's a responsibility of educated people to talk about like big issues within the society, and when doing that, one has to, at least we have to have the correct information. We have to use the correct words, because if we don't do that, then we don't do our part. I mean, we can't go out and because I'm probably the most antisocial guy in this room, so I will never go to someone and say hello, how are you, because that's
deeply offending.
But I can write about it, and some other people can talk about it, but we have to do that, because if we don't do that, no one will.
All right, Barbie and Vicky, I mean, you're meeting these imaginary people for real. I'm wondering what you both think about what the media, new media or old, could do to help sort of rehumanize immigrants, to change this dehumanized narrative about them. I'm sure, Vicky, you have some stories about this. And also, I mean, the second part of the question to you would be, you happen to be working for an NGO that is one of the arch enemies that Andrea also talked about. So you're working for a Soros, a migrant-petting Soros funded organization, allegedly.
Yeah, we get that very often. Yeah.
So what would you expect? You're right now you're coming here from a press conference.
Yeah.
What would help you, your work on the ground, in terms of media coverage and the way media handles this issue?
Well, I agree with you, because we see that Hungarian society needs to be educated, and they need information. They seek information, actually, but the ones who could provide the right information, like the organizations such as Migration Aid, we are very overwhelmed doing the on-the-ground work. But Well, what the press does, I feel them, they're like very clickbait, and it's good that they talk about the issue. It's very important that people see not only the government's talk that everything is fine, we can handle any amount of people coming in the country, but also the other part about the problem. And I receive many phone calls, and I go to interviews, and the main questions is about. Sorry, I'm just tired. So the question, how people could help in a proper way, because when this whole crisis started, people started collecting material things, and the storages got full, and they needed trucks to move them to storages, and everyone wanna help, and sometimes they just have to accept that not all the people can use this stress, this energy to do something, but I would say what they can do is first thing is giving the right information.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to say they are emphasizing the question about the government's role. So they want us to talk about what the governments do. And about the Soros thing, I was at the borders for 4 days with our volunteer group. They are still there. And the mayor of Zahony asked us to, he said that we couldn't post anything about the dormitory we stayed at because we are funded by Soros, and even if we helped them, we couldn't say anything mentioning their names, and he said, yeah, it's a ridiculous thing, but are you funded by Soros? I was like, okay, that's it. It just
okay. So basically, you're doing the job that states ought to be doing, or that states saying it is doing.
Yes.
But you should not be mentioned together
Yes.
with municipalities, because you would shed a bad light on them being.
Yes.
Okay. Well. All right, Bobby. Just a few words about what you feel would make your work and the people that you deal with, their lives easier in terms of press coverage and media.
Yeah, well, as far as our work is concerned, we are fine. We are not the people who are experiencing hardship. So mainly the thing that we find frustrating, and that's one of the reasons why we organize events like this, is because we find that there is no ongoing cooperation among people who are involved with migrants, who are involved with immigrants, who have different areas of expertise on the topic, and who could do something about rehabilitating either terms or the actual people as well. So like Vicky says, the people who are on the ground, feeding the people who are arriving at the moment, or providing them with accommodation, they also need help. They need help from the press. They need help from academics who know their stuff. They need help from professionals like us who understand immigration and have the know-how to support them in this. At the same time, I feel the press is a lot of times in the same situation. So I understand that there have been almost no migrants in the government since in Hungary in the past 7 years. It's unrealistic to expect every journalist in the country to be knowledgeable about the topic. However, if there was an ongoing cooperation, or if there were professional forums, if there were discussions, they would know who to turn to. So when they encounter difficulties as to how to refer to these people, or how to refer to a particular phenomenon that has just come up, they could turn to the NGOs, they could turn to us, they could turn to the academics and have discussions. I don't know how many times Andrea has been called in the past 3 weeks by the press asking for advice. I'm guessing between 0 and 1. But it's somehow not part of the discourse to do this type of work on a cooperative, intellectual basis. And so if you ask me what I think would be helpful, I think it would be helpful for people like us and also the many people who couldn't come to this event because they're currently working with the asylum seekers from Ukraine, to talk to each other and come to consensus. Because even if we decide to rehabilitate the term or not, if we decide that this is derogatory or not, if we represent it together and consistently, I think it has much more power than all the well-intentioned efforts that we are all making for this.
At the very least, you're supplying people, ordinary people, with linguistic tools to at least be able to talk about and in that way think about
Exactly.
this
Sorry,
problem.
just one sentence. I mean, I completely agree with Shani that the first step is to talk, to put these things into open discussion, to not whisper when we say immigration, to not whisper when we say, well, I don't know a better word, but let's call him migrant, but actually bring these terms and these discussions out into the public, and not only when it's current and when it's sensationalistic, but on an everyday basis.
Mm-hmm. Before I open this up to the room for questions, Andre, you wanted to...
I just wanted to reply. You are right and you are wrong.
I assume so, yes.
You are wrong because the number is 4. Two times the Club Radio, once the Hirklik and once the Népszava. But actually it only counts 1. Because this is the same echo chamber. So I speak to the same persons all the time, nice words, try to explain the same 30,000 persons.
Yes.
Shandor, before we open up for questions, would you like to say something?
Yes, which is, for first impression, it will be completely unrelated with what we were talking about, but I think it's important to mention, and that's the Cold War. Because for like 5-6 decades, the world looked like it has huge blocks of countries, and those blocks of countries guarded their borders very well. I mean, in Europe we did not have, say, sub-Saharan African immigration, because the northern African countries like Gaddafi and the other dictators were effectively sealing that part of Africa from Europe, and the same was true with the eastern borders of Europe with the Soviet, the Iron Curtain. It was close to impossible to go through, even for us, not someone from Afghanistan. And one of the underlying cultural concepts of this whole immigration-related discussion is that large part of the population grew up in a world where borders were closed. It was very seldom and very small numbers of people coming through, and if they came through, it was like communist international friendship, that we accepted some people from Kurdistan here in Hungary when Chemical Ali was bombing them in Iraq. It was an exception. Now it's a rule. So, like, if mostly the population about 40 or 50 grew up in a world where there were closed borders and almost no migration, and attitudes will, I think, change on the long run, but it will take another couple of decades when we learn that borders are not closed anymore. We don't have like Northern African dictators gunning down migrants, so keeping them out, keeping the problem away from us. Now, it's not going to happen. It changed, and it was like that for decades, and it will take another decades to get used to that, basically.
Okay, that is a very good cue about open borders. I would like to ask the room here, do you have any questions to the panelists? Because if you don't, then the very last thing that remains for us here today is I asked our panelists in advance to make to think about just a short, quick sort of message or statement that they think you should all take home with you about the current situation and possible attempts at finding ways out. So unless we get any questions, I will ask the panelists to summarize their thoughts or give us the message that they think is appropriate to close this.
I really don't want to be negative again. I hate myself when I'm so negative. So please.
Anything about the ways to rehumanize these people?
Okay, I can say
right?
something.
Yes, thank you, Victoria.
So one thing, they don't want to be refugees, and I just want to say that I think all the people who can protect them, they should, in any ways, offering accommodation, offering some food, going to be a volunteer group, be part of an organization, or just spread the news and talk about this topic.
Okay, thank you. Barbie?
Yes,
you?
I agree. So I think that, you know, we have pretty much said what we wanted to say, but I think the most important is for people to have an open discussion, and to stop feeling uncomfortable talking about these things, or even talk about them if they are uncomfortable. Because some of this, you know, we sit on this panel, or we sit in these conferences and we speak like we are free from the uncomfortableness, we are free from the prejudice, and, you know, we are looking to educate people. But I'm sure that some aspects of these topics are uncomfortable for all of us. But I think that the best way to humanize any topic is to just talk about it like normal people.
Thank you. Donnie?
Before that panel, I had thoughts, what should I say for a takeaway, sorry. But after that conversation between us, I think we should prove them wrong. So your conceptions about talking about it, about that topic openly, and showing people who are these people or what they can do is more important. So maybe I was looking for the wrong place for the answers for the last 7 years, and that's just a sudden strike to my brain. So yes, that's my takeaway. We should prove them wrong about this topic.
Okay, that's nice. Thank you very much. Actually, when I got up this morning and I got my breaking news things on my phone, I saw an article that I could not read yet in one of the Hungarian news outlets, which the title of which was something like, "These are the people who give a human face to Hungary in the eyes of the refugees," or something like this. And I believe it's an article showing the work of the NGOs and the everyday people who actually go out there and help. I think this is something that you talked about a little bit, showing the faces of the people who arrive here, showing them as they are, and showing the people who meet them, ordinary Hungarians, NGOs who do the work with these people on the ground. Maybe that is in the spirit of what's been said here. Sándor, any last words?
Don't shoot.
All right, then I think thank you
you.
very much. Thank you to all my panelists and your patience with the dog. Thank you very much.